Welcome back, everybody. This Week in America, website thisweekinamerica.us. Great to have you with us on the program. As mentioned, our guest back with us, Christine M. Knight, a published author for Fiction One academic work. She's a songwriter, public speaker, and teacher, a university graduate. Christine researches extensively her subject matter. She's traveled extensively overseas, lived for 3 years here in the U.S., San Antonio, Texas, and Montgomery, Alabama. Married to an officer in the Royal Australian Air Force, Christine is settled in the Canberra region in Australia. She's back with us on This Week in America, and it's great to have her back. Christine, welcome to the program. Pleasure to have you back with us.
Thank you, Rick. Hello, listeners.
Today we're going to be talking about parenting. This was an article that recently Christine had written called "Do Socio-Political Interests Obscure What's Best for Children? Lost in the Mix, Ironically Children." A fascinating topic, and that's what we'll be discussing on today's This Week in America. And it starts off, as so many discussions do, where you're pointing out that so many times points get lost in the political side of an issue. Talk about that. We seem to be worried about political correctness, and every time we talk about something, it becomes a political issue, doesn't it?
It becomes a political issue when lobby groups who are representing a particular section in society are lobbying actively both through the media and government to achieve certain goals. And children have definitely become part of that lobbying agenda. When it comes to the right to have a child. In Australia, in the reporting we hear from America and from the UK and elsewhere in the world, we often hear lobby groups saying that they have a right to have a child. Everyone has a right to have a child. And so to begin this discussion, I'd just like to clarify what a right is. And a right is a social, legal, or ethical principle of freedom or entitlement. And no one has a right to have children. Historically, and for thousands of years, the only people who had children were those who are able to procreate. And I'm sure your listeners can think of at least a couple of people who although capable of procreating, should not have. The recent advents in IVF and surrogacy have enabled more people to have children, and of that group who previously couldn't have children, they've really gone many, many extra yards. And in doing so, they've demonstrated a commitment. But it's a commitment to the concept of family without necessarily considering what's necessary to raise children. And children can get lost in the mix as adults impose their own agendas on what children need.
Well, that's interesting. And you talk about that. Our guest on the program is Christine M. Knight. Her website is Christine M. Knight. That's KNIGHT.com.au. You can go to our website, thisweekinamerica.us, and link on directly to Christine's website. She's written a number of books. In fact, this is a topic she discusses in several of the books: Songbird, Life Song, and In and Out of Step. And it's interesting you mentioned what's necessary to raise a child. And too often people go into a relationship in deciding to have a family and not really giving a lot of thought to what's necessary to raise a child. What is necessary to raise a family, to raise a child, to start a family?
Well, I think apart from actually having a child and a basic family structure where two people ideally or where a person is committed to raising a child, the provision of shelter, education, love and food, they're the basics, but it goes beyond the provision of the basics. And when we're talking about raising a child, I think we need to just pause for a second and consider, what does that mean? It's not about having a child in the home with you and letting them grow up ad hoc, working out life on their own as they get older. Raising a child refers to the conscious decisions that adults make in considering the social and environmental pressures that are on children. And it refers to guiding a child into adulthood and to creating a confident, independent adult, not someone full of issues and neuroses. Difficult, I must say, no matter how focused you are on trying to create a healthy, independent adult, life does bring them issues, but it's how they learn to cope with those issues through childhood that are important.
And you talk about the importance of the saying, it takes a community to raise a child. And you talk about the tag team approach. Tell us about that because that really is important. It's not just a mother and father, it's not just a parent. It really takes a community to raise a child.
And it does, and that means friends, schools, clubs that children belong to, single parent groups if the parent is a single parent. It refers to grandparents if children and the family are lucky enough to have them, aunts and uncles. And the tag team approach is really crucial if possible, because raising a child that has daily pressures and strains, and it can be incredibly grinding at times, especially in a world where both parents are working, or in the case of a single parent, where the single person is working. Parents need respite from those stresses, just like children need respite from those stresses. And that respite enables the parent to recharge emotionally, recharge mentally, and to be able to come back and have an objective, not an emotional response to the issues that they confront. Because children, especially as they're getting older, become quite tempestuous and very single focused, and it's easy to get locked into that emotional conflict. So the tag team approach means that people in the community are all conscious of providing support, not just to the child, but also to the parent. And the tag team approach is also really important because anyone who comes into contact with a child in a family is role modeling behaviours, preferably positive ones. But, if you can't keep children in glass houses and or wrap them up in cotton wool because that makes them fragile. Children will be exposed to a range of behaviours, and in a tag team approach, the people coming into contact with a child model the various ways you can be a man,
You're
model the
listening
various
to
ways you can be a woman. Sorry.
Yeah, you're listening to This Week in America. Christine M. Knight is our guest on the program. Her website is christinemknight.com. She's an author, a public speaker, a teacher. We're talking about a news article she'd written recently called Do Socio-Political Interest Obscure What's Best for Children? Lost in the Mix, Ironically, Children. You can log on to our website, thisweekinamerica.us, and go directly to Christine's website. Information there, a lot of great information available at our website. It's interesting you say something about we can't really be overprotective of our children. And one thing you talk about is understanding the world that children live in. We do need to know, for example, the playground can be a very scary place. We really need to be aware of the world that children live in and what they encounter on a daily basis.
Yes, the playground's not like many adults in the Western world live in a politically correct world. We're very conscious of you can't say that, you can't express this view or that view. And we've got to be sensitive to the very diverse groups of and communities within the adult world. Unfortunately, children say it like they think it. There isn't a filter between what they're thinking and what they're saying, and also children may overhear things in the family group where the home is an unfiltered place for views of adults. And children can take those unfiltered views that they've heard from the adults in their family and express them in the playground. It can be actually, the playground's brutal, can be very brutal. We, as adults, need to be aware of what we're saying within the hearing of children. And we need to be aware when we're setting up family structures. We need to anticipate any prejudices that could be expressed through children in the playground to a particular group's children, say the lesbian, gay, bisexual, transsexual group, such a long type of group name for them. We need to be. Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead. Finish that thought because it's very important.
We need to be aware of the stresses that children can face because of our family structure. And we need to anticipate those needs, not deny them, not insist, well, they shouldn't happen. Well, they will, and they do. So we set up parameters, we set up strategies, we talk to our children, we inform them, and we make sure we have the strategies in place to console children. Our goal is to help them grow and to help them become resilient.
One thing you touch upon that's very important is understanding and remembering the perspective of the child. There are certain things that stress us as adults, and we think that the children are not paying attention. Yet I can remember as a child sensing something was going on in the family, and it's the fear of the unknown that's really frightening to children. Talk about that and really being aware that we may not think children are picking up on the vibes that's going in the household, but in most cases they really know what's going on.
Yes, and talking about picking up vibes, children from the earliest stage, from babies, from that very, very early stage of the first 6 months of life, they're very good at sensing emotion, at reading emotion, at picking up non-verbal cues. The spoken word comes later. They read behavior first, and they learn to pick up all the subtle interplays of social interaction by the adults within their family group and beyond. So, and children tend to be egocentric in that they associate any stress, they attribute it often to themselves when they themselves might not be the direct source of the stress. So if a parent comes home and is very, very stressed and a child doesn't understand what the cause of it is, the child will invent a reason, more than likely linked to something that the child has done in the home, and it can be traumatic for the child. We need to talk to children about the stresses that we're facing. If we're unable to add, if we find that they're filtering into the home life, we need to sit down and talk to children about what we're going through, how we're reacting. And when we react in an inappropriate way, it's really important to sit down and say, hey, look, this was happening in my life. I lashed out emotionally this way, but really a better way for me to have coped with that stress and with that emotion would have been this another way, and then to talk about the other way. Everyone throughout life experiences a gamut of emotions. It's impossible just to be a neutral, serene person all the time. And in actual fact, I think it would be unhealthy for a child to think to grow up thinking that you only ever have a plateau of one emotion. What's important is not the gamut of emotions, but that a child may see, but it's teaching the child how to cope with those emotions in an appropriate way. More and more we have children with mental health issues, and they have great difficulty dealing with getting knocked with the life knocks that happen in the playground, that happen in the wider world. When adults are going through those experiences, sharing the fact that they do get knocked down, but they get up again, getting up again and persevering, and what they're learning from persevering, that's absolutely crucial in modelling to children.
Well, and you talk about the role of dialoguing and how important that is, and that's something you've mentioned several times in talking about these various issues. So it really is important to have that open dialogue with our children, isn't it?
Yes, it is, and you can't start too early with that, starting from a very early age, because once they go into the teenage years, they start to put up barriers, and they are very expressionistic in teenage years. And by that I mean their world is filtered strongly through an emotional lens, and they often, through that hormonal period, swing quite strongly, and they can reject a parent's input. What's important is for the parent not to recoil when we feel rejected, but just to realize that it's an emotional response of inner turmoil by a child. And it's really hard dealing with being rejected when a parent feels that they're rejected, and it's an innate instinct to pull back. What we need to do is remember how we felt when we were teenagers, and try and keep a double image happening in our minds, how we felt as teenagers and how we feel now as the adult parent, and try and use that double memory, the recall of childhood and the recall of teenage years, and apply that to the way we're trying to deal with our child's reactions. When you keep that double image of experience filtering in your mind, it helps you soothe the child. It helps you provide a salve to whatever the injury of the child is. And what a child needs is love. And there's a wonderful Swedish saying that says, love me when I least deserve it, because that's when I need it the most. And that's certainly something to remember when handling difficult children. It's all children in their teenage years. Even the most wonderful teenager will have unpleasant moments.
Yeah, there's still periods of difficulty during that, no matter how good they are. Christine M. Knight, our guest on the program, that's Knight. You're listening to This Week in America. Our website is thisweekinamerica.us. You can link on directly to Christine's website or go there on your own at christinemknight.com.au. Mention she's the author of a number of books, Songbird, Life Song, we've talked about in the program before, and you'll find those in the archives at thisweekinamerica.us. Also in and out of step. And parenting and topics, the relationship with parents and children are topics that she deals with in the course of the books. And just several minutes left in the program. You said something else that's very important, too, that sometimes as parents we forget, that through our action and lifestyle, we really are teaching our children. We may not think they're paying a whole lot of attention, but if we say one thing and do something else, they're pretty sharp. They're picking up on that.
Yes, they are. And they learn how to be assertive, and they learn how to be aggressive through how they see us react to life. Ideally, we want to... Having children is actually a really great thing for you as an adult, because it makes you think about your own behaviours, and it makes you constantly, if you're a thinking parent and you want to be a great parent, you're constantly analysing your own reactions, and you realise sometimes that you channel unconscious behaviours that you observed as a child yourself, and then you're mirroring and repeating them as an adult. If you had attachment issues as a child, and now I'm referring to the bond between a mother and a father, it's really important to consciously think about how you can not repeat those lack of care attachment issues with your own child. But good parenting involves... Oh, I'm sorry, I've just gone blank. Good parenting involves thought and care. You'll have to give me another question. I think I've just gone blank.
Yes, and Christine M. Knight is our guest on the program. We've got just a couple minutes left in the show. And one word that you use quite frequently is resilience. Talk about that, the importance to be able to bounce back from situations.
Yes, and Tina Turner's song, I get up every time I'm knocked down again. I've misparaphrased it, but I'm sure your listeners know the song. That's really important. It's not shielding your children from life's issues. In fact, that can injure them. Children need to learn how to recover. They need to learn how to persevere. And we can model resilience through looking at the positives and affirming the positives in life. When we are going through difficult times, as I've said before, talking about what we're going through is important so children understand what we're going through and don't come up with a parallel misunderstanding and interpretation of what that experience is. But we need to talk about what's positive in our life even when there are negatives. And that affirmation of what's good in our life every day is one really important strategy in modelling resilience. Another important strategy in modelling resilience is empathy, not teaching our children to look at life through other perspectives. And in modelling resilience, when we come into conflict with our child, it's important to model reflecting back. And by reflecting back, I mean restating in your words what you think the child's perspective is on an issue without the parental spin. Just to show the child you get how they're feeling and you get what their issue is. And then you encourage the child to reflect back without childhood spin on what you're saying, what your perspective is, what your concerns are. And by reflecting back, and if you do this with other adults in your environment as well, when you come into conflict, that helps diffuse the conflict. When you know your view is heard, that you don't have to keep hammering away at your view, that is very, very good at developing positive relationships. So reflecting back another person's perspective is helping the child look at life through other lenses, through other views. And so in hard times, that's a very important strategy. A third really important strategy in developing children resilience in children is helping them appreciate those precious moments in their life. I often think of children as being on a bus trip, really engaged in the interaction within the bus and completely missing the scenery of life. So what we need to do in developing resilience is help children focus on all the wonderful moments of the day. And they may have been in conflict with you, and they may have had time out, and it may have been a tempestuous, stormy period of the day. But in helping children gain resilience, we look at what else was good in the day. We make peace. We agree to a course of action, or we may, when they're teenagers, have to agree to disagree. But then we focus on all the other positive things in their lives. And encouraging children to realise that every hardship is a learning experience, and it can strengthen us in our journey through life.
A lot of great information, and Christine, unfortunately we're out of time, but there's so much great information there, and we'll have Christine back on future programs. Christine M. Knight, that's Knight, has been our guest on This Week in America. A songwriter, a public speaker, a teacher. Some of the books, Songbird, Life Song, we've talked about those in the program before, In and Out of Step. Her website is christinemknight.com.au. You can log on to our website and get there directly by doing that. Christine, thank you so much for being with us on the program. It is always a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. You're listening to This Week in America, our website, thisweekinamerica.us. Information there on our guest on tonight's program, Christine Knight. This Week in America, website, thisweekinamerica.us.